Our pear is looking pretty good right now. We've got our colors where they need to be, but we still have some work to do to add in some depth and put in details to finish it up. We'll be working on building colors. At the moment, our pear is a little bit pale and it looks a little bit grainy. I can still see the tooth of the paper through. I actually want that. Colored pencil doesn't stick to other colored pencil. It actually needs a little paper tooth to hang on to. So as I build, I'm not going to press harder just yet. I want to deepen the colors, so I'm going to change the angle of my pencil just slightly. We've been working at that 30-degree angle, and now we'll raise it up to about 45 or 50 degrees. It'll push the pigment straight into the paper and help our colors deepen without more pressure. I'll be working over the same areas, paying special attention to my photo reference to see where I want a darker green and a lighter green. I can do that by adding just more blue and more yellow where I want to deepen the color. This is a little bit of a slow process, so be patient with yourself. I know we sometimes want to finish things quickly, but the reward is in the results, and we'll get that by keeping it slow. You can see that when I raise the angle of the pencil, that blue is much more pronounced than it was before. I'll do the same thing with the yellow, and that'll deepen the green where I want it darker. I'm using that smaller elliptical pencil stroke now, filling in the little gaps between the lines from the brush strokes. Okay, I've switched back to my yellow pencil. I've got it at that same taller angle, and I'm intensifying the green. You can really see it popping up now. I'm going to take this yellow pencil right over my shaded area to keep that shadow encapsulated in the green tone. I'm looking for areas where I have a little bit too much blue. A little more yellow will just turn that right into a green. As I approach my highlight, I want to break up my blue and yellow a little bit to create what I call a secondary highlight. I have the brightest highlight that is the point of reflection, and it's surrounded by a little halo of a slightly darker highlight. I'll want color in there, but not as dark as the body of the pear. My pear is really greening up now. I'm going to go again with both the blue and the yellow. My first mistake. I've made my way straight out of the pear and onto the paper. It's easy enough to fix. I'll pull out my white eraser. It's a light enough line that I can just take it right off. I want to do that right away because I don't want it to become part of the paper. The longer I leave it, the more that line will stick. I'm okay now. We'll see if I make any other mistakes as I go. Well, how about that? I made one right there. I pressed too hard. Can you see that little blue line? It looks a little like a lump on the pear, and I don't really want that. I'm going to use my white mounting putty to just lift back that little line. It'll take a little of the surrounding color with it. So I'm just backing up a step. You can see where the color has moved onto the putty. That's what I want. I'm lifting back a couple of layers. Now I'll go back to that spot and rebuild without that irritating little dark line. First yellow, now blue, and I'm off again. Don't worry about making mistakes. This isn't neurosurgery, it's art. Nobody will die if you get a mark wrong, and you can fix just about anything with colored pencils. I'm going to keep layering with this higher angle of pencil to start to fill in the tooth of the paper. An aspect of colored pencil is that you'll always see a little bit of texture, and that's okay. We'll be smoothing it out later with one of our special tools. I'll be moving between the yellow and the blue to keep that green color going. You can see that it's a little more yellow over here on the edge. I want that because it lets my eye go around the pear, so I don't want to create a dark right up to the edge. Remember those lines we started with in the outline? They've become completely enmeshed in our color. So I don't feel as though I'm looking at a coloring book page. I want my pear to look pretty 3D. So letting that colored pencil outline move into the other color just makes it disappear. When I'm working on this part, I like to put on some music. It just keeps me tuned in to my drawing and keeps me patient to keep working. Now my green is developing pretty well. I'm starting to lose the depth of my shadow, so it's time for me to go back and add back a little more of that red and blue that made the violet. When I add the red, I'm going to start to see red. And that's not really what I want just here. I want to blend it in. So I'll get the red down and then hit it again with the blue. I'm not having to make up anything at this point. I'm just going over the same areas that were dark before. You'll notice that I have not yet pressed hard with my pencils. I can get a lot of color on there just by adding more and more layers. When I call it color layering, I'm not kidding. Now I'm headed over that red with my blue. It'll tone it back into the green as just a dark, not as a red. It's the most effective kind of shadow that's inside of a color. There, that's better. Now I've got some really dark areas near the stem. I'm going to start building those a little darker. They're small, but they're really important to make that stem pop out. I started with the blue, and now I'll add a little bit of the red. Remember, I want this to be more of a violet color. Blue again. And now I need to turn it green. So I'll come back with my yellow. There. When I sit back and look at the pear now, I have a lot more depth of color and depth of shadow. I'm kind of ready to smooth this out and blend a little bit. So I'll be using my colorless blending pencil. I'm going to do a little sample to make sure I'm really at the right spot. With a little more pressure and a little higher angle and a tiny circular motion, I'll start working that blue and yellow together, and you'll see a bright green appear. Remember, I'm using friction and a little bit of binder, a little wax to blend these two. I can see that I really like that pear color, so I'm going to keep going. Now, I'm doing this toward the end of the drawing for a reason. Part of adding this pressure is that I'm crushing the paper tooth that I've been counting on to hold colored pencil. If I do it too soon, I won't be able to put more layers on. So I am just slowly now moving that pigment into all those little white wells. After the blending process, I'll be able to add a little more color in terms of maybe 1 or 2 layers, but I really couldn't build up to this nice rich green all over again. I'm going to use the results of this as a barrier for when I add that red blush to the pear. You'll see how that works. As I work, my blender is getting a little bit duller. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't need to be super sharp to do a good job. I think it's better to keep going with the same pressure than to stop and start once you start blending. If I miss a spot, I can always go back. So I don't have to really worry about having this be perfect the first time. I'm still staying out of that white highlight. I want to keep that nice and fresh. We'll be working into that as we do our finishing touches. Now I'm working my blender through the area where I have a lot of red, and you'll see a completely different color pop up. I have this nice yellow-green, and in the shadow, I've got my violet color that I made with the blue and red, and I get kind of a neutral brown violet, which is really the color of the shadow on a green. I'm really liking the results I'm getting. Can you see how much brighter the pear is where I've blended than it was before? It's starting to look like a pear. Nice and rich with bold color. I'm staying a little bit away from the edges at this point because I don't really want to run my pigment off of the pear. I can pick those up later with a sharp blender. I'll show you how that works. Okay, double checking. I think I've caught most of the areas of this pear. I'll just hit it one more time in a slightly different direction to fill a few more of those little white dots. Okay, we've got a nice green pear now. I think we're ready to add the final details. We've got to figure out the stem, add the blush and the freckles to the pear. Then I'll show you a few finishing techniques. I want to add some details now, and the first thing I want to work on is that brown stem. It's really not white with a blue tint. I'll look back at my color recipes and see that this is the kind of brown I want. It's blue, yellow, then red. I've got one layer of the blue. I think I'll just strengthen that a little, remind myself where the darks fall, and I'll switch to yellow. My stem will turn green, but don't worry, it won't stay that way. And now some red. I'm going to have to make this transition a few times to get that dark brown stem. Like always with colored pencil, it looks wrong till it looks right. Be patient with yourself. This is working because of complementary color. I made a green. Now I'm adding a red, which is the complement of the green, and you can see this stem starting to turn brown. I'm using a little bit more pressure now, probably a 3 pressure, because I want this to get dark and fast. So blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, and I'm just about there. If I look really closely, I can still see all 3 colors inside of this brown. That's the look that I'm going for. I'll darken the little shadow on the side of the pear, and I'm pretty happy with that look. I'm going to use this same progression of colors. I want to add the brown that is on the top of the pear. It looks like a little drippy apron. I'll use the same progression of pencils, blue, yellow, red, but I'm working in a specific shape now. I'm pressing a little harder, maybe at about a 3 pressure. And at first it will just look like blue. But watch what happens as I move through these 3 pencils. We saw that we could get the brown for the stem, and the same thing will happen here. Be patient. It takes a few rounds of pencils. Our color layering started out really lightly, but we really have quite a bold color now. So I've got to press a little bit harder just to put pencil on top of smoothed out pencil. My color's building, it's turning brown. I'm pretty happy with how it's going. I won't need to smooth this out again. The texture on the pear, I want to leave with a little bit of a feeling that it's different than the body of the pear. Looking at my reference, I can see that there's a little drip that kind of goes down below. I can just add that in as I go. There we go. Now with the same 3 pencils, I can add those freckles that are on the pear. Let's add those little freckles to the pear. They're a really dark color, like a dark brown, almost a black. I'm going to depict those as a violet, which will mean my red pencil and my blue. When I look at the photo reference, I see that there are hundreds of them. If I put them all on, it'll be way too much. So I'm just going to add a few, and it'll give you the idea that they're there. I think I'll start with my blue pencil, and I'm just actually making little random dots. I'm using the blue because if I make a mistake, it's easier to blend it back into the green than if I start with the red. I'll be following up with the red pencil. An interesting thing about this kind of texture is it shows most in the midtones. The midtones aren't as bright as the highlight or as dark as the shadow. This is all midtone in this green area. So that's where I'll focus my efforts with the dots. That's a pretty good start. Now, with the red pencil, all I have to do is go directly back over those little dots, and they'll almost look black, even though they're red and blue. I can see a little red peeking out. No worries, I'll just add more blue back. I'll add a few over on this side too, and I'll start with red just to break it up a little bit. Now, everywhere I can see red, I'm covering with blue. Some of these are darker, some are a little lighter. That's kind of natural. We'll get the idea that it's a speckled pear. I'm having to press pretty hard to get through all this colored pencil. I'm using about a 3 or 4 pressure now, so I'm really making some effort. I could stick with this for a long time, getting different sizes of dots, slight color variations, but we're getting the idea. Okay, the other big feature that I need to add to my pear is that red blush that's over on the left-hand side. We know that Bartlett pears get that red blush, but I couldn't add it until now because when I embedded red into the color, I got that dirty, muddy kind of shading color. And I want this red to stand up right on top. I'm going to hit this area one more time with my blender. I've sharpened it, and I want to exclude all this color underneath from the red. So everywhere that I'm going to have the blush, I'm just running right over those freckles. I'm kind of moving into my highlight a little. It's dragging a little bit of pigment to soften that. We're in the home stretch now. So when I've blended that just a little bit more, I'll come in with my red pencil and with a very light touch. This is a 1 pressure. I'm going to glaze red over all this green, and you'll see that it will just sit right on top. As long as I don't go back with my blue and yellow, it won't turn muddy. It'll look like a lovely red blush on the outside of that pear. I'm looking at my photo reference to see basically where it goes. I can see that it runs into the highlight, so I'll lighten my touch as I go through the bottom of the highlight. It comes way up on the side. And I'm just glazing red layer by layer until I feel like I have that nice blush. Okay, all that's left is to make the edges nice and clean. You remember that we worked from the inside of the object to the outside. I'm going to use my blue pencil for this just to tidy up these edges. I'll come back with the yellow and work up to the blue so that even the edges will be nice and green. Because I'm right-handed, it's comfortable for me to work from the right to the left side. I'm now bringing in the yellow pencil right up to and over that blue just to tidy up the edge. And you'll see there's no outline. It just turns green and melts right in to the other pencil. If I turn the paper over, I could do the other side. And I'll end up with a beautiful finished pear. With the edges all cleaned up, the color all smoothed, and that nice blush on the pear, I feel like it's complete. I've really stayed out of the white area except for a slight glaze of yellow to tie it in. I'm letting the white of the paper speak as the highlight. I've gone back and pushed the darks as much as they need to be, and I have a nice plump round pear. This project took me about 2.5 hours, so be patient. Take your time with the layers and don't rush. You'll get a really satisfying result. In the next lesson, we'll work on a green leaf so we can really practice creating a variety of greens and some nice lights and darks.